Thanks, Teresa.
Cool. Well, I think we'll have some other people filtering in, but since we have just an hour with Julia, I'd love to get started. Really grateful, Julia, to you for being here with us today. Our group, so everybody here is either a Climate Farm School alumni or has just very recently been through a Climate Farm School and is finishing up the course over the next couple of weeks. So we have spent that time, whether it's this year or for Ash a couple of years ago in one of our pilot courses, learning about the food system and regenerative agriculture. And the sort of highlight and culmination of that is spending a week on farms with farmers, learning directly from them and hearing more about the opportunities and barriers in regenerative agriculture. And then we also spend time talking about the larger system, the policy and the financing surrounding it, and thinking about where we can all plug in. So we're really grateful to have a different perspective, somebody who's a little bit further along in the supply chain and has done a lot of work in this space. So for those of you who don't know, Julia is the founder of Moonshot Snacks, which we ate a lot of last week at Piscinus Ranch and included in our dinner as well. And also Planet Fwd. And Moonshot Snacks, it should be noted, was just sold to Patagonia Provisions, which is incredible news. So congratulations on that. And Planet Fwd, which I will quickly say works to help consumer brands reduce their carbon footprint and make it easier to understand what their footprint is and find the pathway there. But I'll turn it over to Julia to talk more about her work and how it impacts regenerative agriculture and maybe what inspired you to start this. And then after Julia speaks for a bit, we can turn it over to questions. And I definitely have a lot of questions as well. So thank you, Julia.
Thanks, Ryan. Actually, before we get started, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves so I know who's in the room. Maybe you could just share who you are, your organizational or affiliation, and what brought you to Climate Farm School. I'll popcorn it. Teresa, can we start with you? I think you may be on mute, Teresa.
Yay. Okay, now is that better? Okay.
Perfect. You sound great.
Thank you. I'm Teresa. No particular affiliation with any organization other than Terra, but it's been a fantastic experience so far, and enjoying it. And I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, George.
Hello, Julia. My affiliation now is with a company in Greece, which is a network of island municipalities working on sustainable development and circular economy. So I got the first course with Terra and now the second course, climate farming, and I have an increasing interest about regenerative agriculture. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Ash?
Sorry. Hi, Julia. My name is Ash. I live in Seattle. I'm a Climate Farm School alum, like Brian just said. I currently run a regenerative food company that's rooted in cultural fusion. My interest in regenerative agriculture is twofold. One is from the perspective of climate action, and the second is from this notion of cultural fusenness, because so much of what is regenerative agriculture is really going back to our roots a little bit and going to ways of working with nature. And I would like to use my own culinary tradition to sort of bring that to life.
Thank you, Ash. Alana?
Hi, I'm Alana. I work for a nonprofit called Zero Foodprint. And what we do is we work with member businesses, oftentimes restaurants, but we're also getting into CPGs. And they give 1% of sales and we redistribute it as grants to farmers to take on more regenerative practices. And so I was just on the Piscinus Ranch Climate Smart Farm School because I was really interested in the financing aspect.
Great. Thank you, Alana. William? Will?
Hey everyone. Hi. Hi Julia, nice to meet you. I'm Will. I was also part of the group at Piscinus last week. I'm actually in between roles right now, but I'm really excited to pivot into restoration landscape and regenerative ag. So this is the perfect opportunity for me.
Fantastic. McKenna?
Hi, nice to meet you, Julia.
Hi.
Hi. Um, and I was also at the Piscinas Ranch Climate Farm School. My interest in joining was, what kind of got me interested in regenerative agriculture was from, I did some woofing and I studied sustainability in college, done some home gardening. I live in Hollister and I've gone to Piscinas Ranch to buy, I was trying to be more just tapped into my local food system. So that's how I knew about Piscinas Ranch and then found out about the Climate Farm School. So it just seemed like a cool opportunity to get more involved. And I'm so happy that I did it. And it's nice to see everybody again on the call.
Amazing. We'll do Nat and then Jane. Nat?
Hi all, my name is Nat. I work with a group called Open Team, which stands for Open Tech Ecosystem for Agricultural Management. We're working on creating a tech toolkit of open source and interoperable tools for agricultural management. And I have not been a part of a climate farm school, but one of our fellows is and invited me to this event. So super excited to be here and learn more.
Thanks so much. And Jane, take us on home.
Hi, I'm Jane. Nice to meet you. I just did the Climate Farm School last week at Piscinas Ranch. And I'm interested in getting involved with regenerative agriculture through a job and volunteering, but still figuring out what that is.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. Well, I'm Julia Collins. As Ryan mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Planet Fwd. We are a software company that helps consumer businesses in food, fashion, and beauty to understand their climate impacts and to reduce them. We're particularly interested in the relationship between greenhouse gas emissions produced by agricultural systems and our ability to meet Paris goals. And that's why we work with our companies to help them deeply understand how their farming practices, manufacturing practices, distribution, retail, end of life, and consumer use all impact their overall emissions picture. At Planet Fwd, we are not carbon reductionists. We do not have carbon tunnel vision. We look at land and land use change, water usage, energy usage, and are beginning to look at nutrient density, biodiversity, and eutrophication as additional climate-related impact metrics. We're also looking at supplier diversity and human welfare as impact areas to help measure and improve with our clients. Why we do what we do is we fundamentally believe that businesses have a responsibility to combat the climate crisis. And what we want to do is catalyze those businesses to help create a just and regenerative future for all beings. The software that we've built has been designed with an incredible amount of rigor. We really have created a data-driven climate action platform. I love that, Nat, you're here from Open Team. I think one of the things that we share is a value on transparency and accessibility, and also delivering a tool that's been created by scientists. What our customers do with our solution is they receive, operationally viable recommendations that are contextually relevant and help them to make really good decisions. There are often trade-offs that we have to look at when we think about packaging or energy usage. So we provide the data to help our customers make better decisions. And we hope that in doing so, we're really creating enduring tools, adaptable systems with a future focus to help, again, catalyze businesses to do their part to stand up for climate change. As Ryan mentioned, I love what you said, Ash. I also was the founder of a regenerative food company, which was Moonshot. The only reason I created Moonshot was to expand regenerative agriculture. I just, like you, believed that consumers really wanted the ability to eat in alignment with their values. And like you, I truly believe that regenerative agriculture is a new name for a very ancient practice. And that in fact, indigenous people and people all over the world, particularly people of color, have been managing land or being connected to land in ways that are really regenerative for thousands of years. And so it's good to see new energy around a very old practice, but I always like to call that out, and I'm glad that you did. You know, as a founder, it's really interesting. It's an interesting journey. You know, sometimes you build companies and they don't work. Sometimes you build companies and they do. I think for me to have, you know, began building Moonshot in 2019 and then have just sold it to Patagonia. I literally just sold the company less than a month ago. That's a very quick ride. You normally build a company and stay in for quite a bit longer. So also happy to share more about kind of the founder journey, what it looks like from start to exit. My reason for being here, I just have gotten to know Lainey over the years and deeply respect the work that she's doing, and have always wanted to be a part of this community. So thank you so much for taking time to be with me and welcoming me today.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Julia. So I have questions, but I would love to open it up. If anybody has a question, you can just come off mute and go ahead and ask.
Happy to jump in. Julia, my question is a little bit from the founder perspective, but specifically around consumer interest. So much of, I'm sure, what you saw with Moonshot is what I'm experiencing as a new and first-time founder is the infrastructure for regenerative ag to expand at scale is what seems to be maybe lacking is the right word. I don't know if it's the right word, but there is so much scope to work on the infrastructure that enables farmers who are on this continuum to get direct to consumer. So a little bit of what I'm hearing is reluctance around investing on the demand side. They certainly haven't raised yet, so I haven't experienced this firsthand, but from fellow founders, I do get the sense that there is less interest in investing on the demand side. I'm wondering if you can speak to how you thought about setting up the infrastructure and how brands can either seek the investment or become investment independent. That's such a broad word, right? But become sustainable businesses that can help build this infrastructure.
Yeah. So sort of three themes within that very good question. I think the first is the importance of having the right infrastructure to be able to scale regenerative agriculture. You know, Ash, when I first thought about founding Moonshot in 2019, the only thing that I knew was that I wanted to build a brand that would prove that there was consumer demand for regenerative agriculture so that that could act as a flywheel to expand for the expansion. And the thing that I learned very quickly was that so many farmers were already using fantastic practices or wanting to expand their practices, but that they really were missing that value added processing on farm or near farm to make it possible. So Moonshot makes really delicious crackers, but we don't put wheat in crackers. We put flour in crackers. And while it was relatively easy to find several fantastic farmers who were practicing regenerative, who wanted to work with us, the thing that was really missing was the miller, right? That value-added processing. So we were very fortunate to have been introduced to Kevin and the team at Cairn Spring Mill, who had been working with regenerative wheat farmers in Skagit Valley, Washington, and in Western Arizona, and had already put together this wonderful, you know, essentially like infrastructure. And without that, Moonshot couldn't have existed. And so, you know, as we think about what needs to happen in this space in order for regenerative agriculture to expand, we really do need capital allocators to be investing in creating that infrastructure. And I think it looks like Greg's no longer with us, but as he's thinking about doing, oh, you're here with us. Sorry, just moved in my tile. Greg, George, as you think about doing this work, you know, within the communities that you're working with in Greece, it really is interesting to think about the degree to which that middle chain processing infrastructure has to exist, whether you're thinking about circular packaging or whether you're thinking about regenerative agriculture. Without those processing nodes, the whole web can't be in place. Ash, as it relates to funding, the thing that I will say, I've been a venture-backed founder for longer than I've done anything else in my career. I've actually raised more than $600 million in venture funding across multiple businesses since 2015. I'm the first Black woman to have raised what we call a unicorn valuation when my company was valued at more than $2 billion. And I will tell you, this is the strangest funding climate that I've ever been a part of. Over the course of these 10 years, I've seen some cycles. This is just a weird one. And so often investors are looking for a reason to say no, more so than they have in the past. If just a few years ago, many investors were interested in funding the demand side of the equation, right? People who are building brands to get consumers excited. And so I think what we're seeing is a general pullback overall that will correct once there's more certainty in the markets.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course.
Julia, just a follow up there. Do you see in speaking to, for instance, Karen Spring, or thinking about this landscape, a reason why there aren't more of these sort of middle chain processing? Is it just that it hasn't been built out yet because it's a newer idea, or is there something else holding it up?
I think it's funding primarily, right? It's a combination of not having enough capital allocators who have the right investment horizons and the right returns, expectations around returns to put money into building that infrastructure. It is very much the case that I've done a lot of work within the venture ecosystem, and I've benefited from being a venture-backed founder. But I also believe that venture is like a precision instrument. It's like a scalpel. It's not the same thing that you would use to cut down a tree. It should be used like a laser instrument. And I work with a lot of founders. I'd say, Ryan, only 2 to 3% of the businesses that I see are appropriate for venture funding. And that leaves 97 to 98% of fantastic fundable businesses that shouldn't be funded by venture. And I think what's missing right now are capital allocators with longer investment horizons, more reasonable expectations of returns and multiples, who can put money into businesses like Karen Spring.
Mm-hmm. Do you see a role, thank you for that. Do you see a role for government and policy in helping to build out this sort of infrastructure?
I certainly do. So we'll talk about something related, which is, in addition to believing that there's not enough middle chain infrastructure to support regenerative agriculture at the scale that consumers are looking for it, retailers are looking for it, I also believe that there's not enough technical assistance for farmers on the ground who want to make that transition. Like, the existing programs through NRCS are fantastic. They help with outreach and training and payment of incentives. But the fact is, there's so much more demand for these programs than there is funding. So government absolutely has a role to play. We need for the USDA to be able to put more funds into expanding these NRCS programs. I think, I'm very inspired by the work that Tom Vilsack is doing in his capacity of Secretary of the USDA. I was inspired when I saw the Climate Smart Commodities Act come through with $1 billion in commitments for pilots. But I do worry about the accessibility of those dollars and the way that, farmers who have already been systematically excluded will continue to be excluded from the allocation of those funds.
If I could jump in with a question there. So you said like 90 98% of businesses are probably not suitable for venture funding. What do you see as some other alternative or more appropriate funding models for, especially on the demand side, especially like consumer-oriented goods and like CPG type of products?
Absolutely. And Edlin, you weren't here at the beginning of the call, but could you introduce yourself? Let me know your affiliation and what brought you to farm school.
Yeah, my name is Edlin Choi. I'm a New Yorker, I guess, for most of my life. I lived in San Francisco for just over a year, then moved to the South to live and work on a regenerative livestock farm, vertically integrated, multi-species, like all this great stuff. And then moved back to the city, was kind of missing the farm life. And so I went to Climate Farm School out in Sebastopol, where I met Brian. And I'm currently working on a sort of climate positive or regenerative, whatever term you want to use, nose to tail CPG brand. The idea being, things like broth are super popular in the market today, but most are sourcing overseas or from big aggregated like suppliers. Whereas the small to mid scale, they often, those parts just go to waste, like bones, fats, organ meats, all that stuff, to the point where a lot of farmers I've been talking to kind of stop taking them back even from the processor, because it just takes up freezer space until they throw it out 2 years later. And so the idea is to try to aggregate that supply, create these, familiar, accessible, nutrient dense food products, sort of Korean inspired. Like the flagship product is going to be a Korean style bone broth. Yeah, that's where I'm coming from. I'm kind of looking for grants, like entering some startup competitions. Not really considering venture funding because I kind of have the same idea. Like the returns are just like a little bit, don't really fit with the profile of low margin food businesses. Yeah, that's my spiel, I guess.
So amazing. I'm so glad you introduced yourself. Thank you. It's great to have the additional context. So yeah, I think you're doing the right thing. And I think founders who are trying to access non-dilutive sources of capital like grants are really smart. The problem is sometimes, putting together a dozen small grants can cause a lot of administrative overhead. And so there is this sort of filtering exercise that you have to do to determine which are the grants that are going to create the least overhead for you on an ongoing basis, but also bring in the highest check. I do think that, angels who are sometimes adjacent to venture, but who are investing for deeply personal reasons can be great capital partners at the early stage. And there are angels who write $250,000 checks. There are angels who write $1 million checks. And so sometimes it can be helpful to do some networking within the venture ecosystem to be able to access those angels. But I believe heavily and have really benefited from having the right angels invest in my business early on. Sometimes, Edwin, I've had angels write $25K checks, but be the ones to introduce me to customers or get me onto the shelves. And so I think that's great. Family offices and high net worth individuals, who are a bit more institutionalized can be great as well for the kinds of businesses that we're building, because again, they're investing for more than just return. They're investing as part of their legacy, as part of their vision for the future. So I wouldn't be shy to really aggressively try to network within those communities as well. And again, sometimes that venture funder can be not necessarily the one who you want to write the check, but they can introduce you to folks who are within their network, because sometimes those angels are also LPs of some of the funds. And then with that said, like, again, I've been a venture-backed founder longer than I've done anything in my career. I am not anti-venture in any way, but having done it for so many years, I'm well aware of it's just a very narrow karma. There's like a very narrow set of bounds in which you need to operate. The time horizon for you to exit the business, the multiple that's expected when you exit, the margin that you delivered during the interim, and then having to raise not just once, but often 5, 6, or 7 times before you exit. And so a lot of my life is spent raising money. At any given point in time, I'm spending between 20 and 75% of my time just raising money. And so that also means I need to have a fantastic team of operators who can hold the business for me while I'm out there beating down the doors. So again, it's a funny way to live your life. And I think because venture has its own community of journalists and gets a lot of press, we sort of think it's the only way to build a business, and it actually is just one tiny way. Ash?
Thanks for that.
Before I dive into my question, it looks like there is a related question to what you said, Julia, in the comments. Alana wants to know what makes a company a good fit for venture capital.
Yeah, I think it's a company. So I built a software company, and what software companies need is a lot of cash very quickly to build something very quickly and get it into the market with the expectation that it's going to return that cash also very quickly. So if you believe that you're building a business that can return capital at a 4x rate or higher within about 7 to 8 years or less, then you should absolutely pitch to venture investors. But again, think about that. You have to have confidence that within 7 or 8 years or less, you're going to return the capital that's been put in at a 4x rate or higher. And that just isn't most CPG businesses, that isn't most agribusinesses, and these are incredibly fundable businesses, but these are businesses that need more patient capital, more aligned capital, capital that likes a lower risk, longer investment horizon, right? Capital that understands that the expectation of financial return is just one element. There's an expectation of social return, environmental return. And so that capital does exist, but it doesn't always exist in the traditional kind of venture ecosystem.
Thank you, Julia. I'm going to dive into my question. How early should consumer product businesses, or really even things like restaurants and that are more small to medium businesses, right, that are not being venture backed, how early should we be thinking about our planetary impact? Now, I'll give you a bit more context. For my business, we work with regenerative farmers. We put our product in compostable packaging, but there's obviously at my scale, being bootstrapped, there is limitations to how much I can invest in growing the business versus understanding climate impact. So auxiliary, that's a bit of context to say, how do you think about it, and how do you, how early would you recommend that we start building this into sort of the ethos of the company?
Well, I'm very biased, but I think there's actually no reason to build a new business at this stage in the Anthropocene unless that business is going to help save the planet. That's just my radical viewpoint. The world doesn't actually need more things. We don't need more things, and we don't need more companies. We really don't. That's not the problem. What we need are more things that are going to help save us. And so I think the desire to build a business has to be in lockstep with the desire to build a business that's going to do its part to help make the changes that we need. So it's not too early. I think it should be a precursor. And I'm talking about every founder. I don't care whether you're building a video game company or the next TikTok or the next amazing nose to tail delicious CPG brand. Like every brand, every business coming out right now should be doing it because they believe they're going to help save the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tejas, do you want to ask a question?
Maybe just introduce yourself first, Tejas, because I missed you in the beginning.
Yeah. So my name is Tejas Nair. I have a background in building large-scale enterprise software. I've been doing that for about 20 years, and then I wanted to do something more purposeful with the rest of my career. So that's how I got interested in climate change and did the Terra Learning for Action course, and then found that I'm particularly interested in food and ag and nature-based solutions, and then also did the Climate Farm School program. And so I've been like I explored some ideas of my own in the like around regenerative space, didn't find a good product market fit, and now I'm interviewing with a couple of startups to see if there's a good fit for me there. So my question is around how the Planet Forward does the LCA calculation. How much of it is like automated, and how much of it is like kind of a consulting kind of work?
So 85% of what we deliver as a solution, we deliver through our software product. And then about 15% of what we deliver through services. So we really are a software as a services company. And the reason why is we believe that software provides the speed and scale to decarbonize global supply chains quickly. One of the products that we deliver is life cycle analysis. We can do a life cycle analysis for this phone. We could do a life cycle analysis for Edwin's bone broth, for Ash's food, for literally anything, this sweater that I'm wearing. And the problem, as you know, Tejas, is it Tejas or Tejas?
Yeah, it's Tejas.
Tejas,
yeah.
Is that you probably already know this because you've been looking at the space, but in the past, life cycle assessments for products were really conducted only by practitioners, consultants essentially, and they charge about $14,000 to $20,000 per product life cycle assessment for one product. And do you know how long it takes them to deliver a report? 2 to 3 months. And it's like, oh boy, if we're going to decarbonize global supply chains, we have to understand where climate impacts are coming across the supply chain. You have to use life cycle assessment to be able to do that. And if every life cycle assessment costs $20,000 and takes 3 months, we'll never get there. So what Planet Fwd did was to ingest a tremendous amount of data, like a huge amount of data, including data sets that we built on our own, and then wrote software on top of the data to be able to do those life cycle assessments in minutes for, a fraction of the cost.
What kind of challenges have you encountered around that? Like, I mean, how do you identify, say, the life cycle carbon footprint for your sweater, for example?
Yeah. So what we did at Planet Fwd is we actually bought another company. We're a little bit like a 15-year-old startup because we bought another company that had been developing the largest data set for global supply chain footprints over a 15-year period. I had the very good fortune of meeting the founder of that company in a convening a bit like this one. And we just hit it off and kept in touch. And he did me the great honor of letting me buy his company and come on as our CTO. And via that acquisition, we had a huge head start in terms of the span of our data. Now, about a third of our team are PhDs in life cycle assessment and climate science who are continuing to build new LCA data for us. So the answer is big data.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And please, if you're on LinkedIn, Tejas, just DM me. I'd be very interested in knowing how your job search is going and if I can be supportive.
Thank you.
Julie, I just want to jump in question here, and then I'll turn it over to Ash, who's raised her hand. But you mentioned not having carbon tunnel vision as a company. I'm interested in how that plays out in your life cycle analysis and what things you're trying to incorporate. And then not to make this question too long, but where do you see sort of the major limitations right now in terms of areas lacking research?
Right. So, the beauty of carbon is that it is a very sort of clear and understandable metric. And in some cases, it's important to remove nuance in order to drive alignment and speed. But when it comes to climate change, there really is no silver bullet solution. And as much as we need to do to radically reduce emissions, we also need to adapt because climate change is here, it's already happening. right? There's only so much we can do to reduce fast enough. We also have to adapt. And so when we think about measuring things like, water infiltration, that for us is important as a climate solution, because the more soils can hold, water, the less catastrophic an event like a flood is, right? So we think about how regenerative agriculture improves climate resilience at the same time that we think about how regenerative agriculture can be a lever in decarbonization, whether it's by emitting less greenhouse gas emissions through farming or even carbon sequestration in some cases, with many caveats. So some of the challenges for us are, again, around the data. It's very easy for us to use life cycle assessment to be able to glean insights around greenhouse gas emissions, water use, land use, and energy use. But land use change, for example, is more challenging. And for those of you who have been looking at the evolving net zero recommendations by SBTi, you'll see that there are now requirements around flag emissions, which means that you need to be able to model land and land use change. So that's challenging. We know that biodiversity is incredibly important for climate change mitigation and also climate resiliency, right? But getting really good and accurate data on the biodiversity has been challenging. The same thing for nutrient density, the same thing for eutrophication. And so for us, the challenge really is in being able to get very good data, because that's what we need in order to be able to deliver our solution to our customers.
It's really helpful. Thank you. Ash, do you want to go ahead?
I feel like I'm monopolizing the questions. Thank you for letting me. Dovetailing off of that, what would you like to see more of? Because in this group, even, right, but some of us are working on the infrastructure pieces, on the finance pieces, a couple of us are working on the consumer products. What would you like to see more of in the world when it comes to taking this more nuanced approach to regenerative, or really to anything in the world? And what are you not seeing enough of?
I'd like to see more folks like Tejas who have said, I've built a fantastic career. I have some really incredible skills, and I want to put those skills to work on climate change. Like, that is selfishly, that is what I hope all people are doing right now. When I talk to friends at like Google and Meta and Salesforce, and they're like, how can I help? I'm like, the way that you can help is you could loan me your 10 best engineers for 6 months so I can get more products out the door. And so that might not apply as much to the folks that are on the screen here, but it is one of the things I wish for and I'm being very pushy about in certain circles. I want to see more capital allocators who know how to fund businesses like yours, Ash, and like yours, Edland, and like Moonshot, before I sold it to Patagonia. I want to see more folks like George who are working on multi-stakeholder approaches and who are thinking, without carbon tunnel vision and understanding the impact of circularity. So more sort of broad focus. I want to see more collaboration between huge companies and small ones. So Planet Fwd has benefited greatly by the presence of some very large partners. For example, ADM, for example, Compass Group, the global food service company. And when these massive organizations can figure out how to work with small startups, there's a lot of magic that happens, because the startups bring the innovation and the speed and the bias for action, and the larger organizations bring the resources and the stability and the scale. What I'd like to see less of, I'd like to see less of us competing on the math and more of us working to create value. And so it is exciting to see the evolving work happen at Open Team. I think the open source tools that they are building are really important in order to allow stakeholders across the food value chain to align around similar methodologies, similar ways of creating the calculations. You know, for example, suppose two brands want to put a carbon label on a product. If we believe that carbon labeling can help consumers to buy more climate friendly products, which maybe we believe and maybe we don't. But let's just say that, for example, if two brands use two different solutions providers for even the same product, they would probably get a different number. And that's what I mean about competing on the math. And that's challenging, right? So I'd like to see more alignment around basic methodologies for doing carbon accounting in our space, so that we have the ability for folks to be on an even footing. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. Bless you.
Julia, you alluded to this a bit in your introduction, taking things in a slightly different direction, but a theme that's come up certainly a lot last week at Martinez, but I think in every course that we've had is the human side of all of this, specifically of regenerative agriculture, and the idea that these practices can't stop with the plants. They have to extend to humans, and it doesn't work if this isn't regenerative for people. And so having built a number of organizations and running a team now, I'm curious your approach to this.
Yeah, so at Planet Fwd, we think about regenerative business both within the context of how we operate inside of our organization and within the context of how we operate in the world, right? So within our organization, we have a set of values that guide every behavior and every interaction. For example, one of our core values is grace, actually. And I think if you go to most companies and look at the values that are on the wall, maybe nobody goes into companies anymore, I don't know. You don't often see grace listed as a value. See many other things. The reason why grace is such an important value at Planet Fwd is grace really is the belief that we are all valuable. When you operate with grace, you're operating in a way that reflects your belief that the person on the other side has value. And when you have grace with yourself, you're operating in a way that reflects your belief that you yourself are valuable. So having grace means recognizing that people need rest. Having grace means recognizing that even sometimes the most talented software developers on the planet might not have a deep background in life cycle analysis. And so acting as a translator. Operating with grace means within the context of a negotiation or a sale, you're not trying to negotiate the last penny off the table. And so it really is related to kindness, but it is a posture. And I think grace is what's required for all of us to navigate our way through this very tender time. You know, yeah, I don't know if any of you are sci-fi readers, but I had a chance to meet Kim Stanley Robinson at yeah, at a Expo West event recently, and he said something really interesting, which was that the ability to tread the line between radical optimism and total fear really is the core skill that's required to be a human right now. And boy, is that hard, right? Boy, is that hard. So it's neither being optimistic at every moment, nor is it being in a fearful place every moment. It's towing that line. And I think in order to do that, you have to have a lot of grace. When we think about the work that we're doing in the world, you know, it's so funny, like we're working with really big companies, but often when they come to work with us, they come with almost like a lot of shyness. Because nobody really feels good about where they're at right now. If you're in the Fortune 100, it is necessarily the case that there's something highly extractive that you've done to get yourself into that Fortune 100. And there's a lot of shyness and, dare I say, even a tiny bit of shame around that. And so what we have to do is to have grace for those customers and to be able to invite them into doing the work with us You know, it looks like software, but it's really transformation. And transformation is messy and painful and hard and awkward. And so we have to show a lot of grace to our customers when it comes to the way that we help them understand what they've been doing, as well as how to get better.
That's really powerful insight, and it makes me think. I don't know if you have insight into this this far into sort of the supply chain of your customers, but I'm curious if those customers in turn are making any asks of farmers or suppliers along their chain change their practices. You know, we're curious specifically in this group about whether companies are putting pressure on regenerative farmers to change, or conventional farmers to become regenerative farmers. I'm curious if you have insights into that and how that might play out.
We do. So the only reason why people come to work with Planet Fwd is because we're able to show them not just how to make a good report for CDP or GRI, we're able to show them how to actually decarbonize their value chains. So there's a real filter function happening there. If all you care about is reporting or creating a nice report, you don't even work with us. So I have the benefit of only working with organizations who are focused on decarbonization. So that's a real win for me. And if you're focused on decarbonization within the world of food and beverage, the only way that you can get there is by looking at real interventions within your supply chain. Many of those interventions are on farm, and some of them are elsewhere. I'll give you an example. One of our largest customers sells a tremendous amount of quinoa. They just sell so much quinoa for a couple of products that they're putting in. And through working with Planet Fwd, they were able to understand from a greenhouse gas emissions, water, land, and energy standpoint, how the quinoa that they were currently sourcing compared to really fantastic quinoa being made by our friends at Simply. I don't know if anybody knows the amazing team of Matt and Sorella at Simply Foods, Simply with an I. And so because we were able to quantify how their conventional quinoa was worse than Matt and Sorella's fantastic quinoa, they shifted some of their quinoa supply over to Matt and Sorella. So this is a great outcome for this company that's doing the right thing. It's a great outcome for all of us. And they were able to message that to their consumers, which resulted in a same store sales increase of about 125% when they made this announcement around their climate friendly quinoa. So yes, love that team too, Ash. So that's an example. Another example is the fantastic team at Matriarch Foods. I don't know if anybody knows Anna Hammond, the founder of the CPG company called Matriarch Food. Matriarch uses upcycled tomatoes to create delicious sauces. We have a customer that happens to sell a tremendous amount of sauce. And we were able to quantify the greenhouse gas emissions impact between Anna's upcycled sauce and the sauce that they were buying using life cycle analysis. And because we did that, this company then began to source more from Matriarch. So that is the theory of change in action. If we can quantify the difference between conventional products and climate-friendly products, then we can give the folks who are in a position to purchase those products the information that they need to make better purchasing decisions. And then the beauty is, if at the end of it all, you can pull that story through to a retailer like Whole Foods or a consumer like any of us, and that makes them buy more, then that's the whole flywheel happening. And if we could do this, not for one customer, but for every food and beverage company across the planet, then maybe we really do have a chance at decarbonizing food fast enough for us to meet our Paris goals. At least that's what I get up every day to work on.
That's incredibly cool. I have a follow-up question, but I just want to check if anybody else has questions in the room. Tejas?
Yeah, so I was wondering if there is any movement, like somebody working on having a like greenhouse gas like labeling, like we have calorie labels on food products. Is there like any movement towards like publishing more information on the carbon footprint so that consumers can be more aware of what they are buying?
Yes, many companies are already working on this. We do this work for a couple of customers at Planet Fwd. Numi Tea This fantastic tea camp company is an example of a customer that we do product carbon labels for. Just Salad, the salad chain in New York and the East Coast, is another customer. So we do quite a lot of carbon label work. I will say, Tejas, that this is more popular in Europe. You know, Oatly is probably the example of the brand who's gotten the most attention for their product carbon labels. And they recently announced, I think actually just a few months ago, that they were bringing their product carbon labels to the US market. Of course, they're a European brand. And so we're seeing more of this. I think the question that is on everyone's minds is, can we align around a methodology that ensures that brands are making these calculations in the exact same way, so that we're not competing on the math, but we really are creating the right number? Planet Fwd is working with some legislators on a voluntary bill, bipartisan bill that would be introduced into the Congress that created a framework for voluntary carbon labeling. And so again, Ryan, you asked some questions about the impact of policy. What's the role of government? I really do think that when we are creating messages for consumers, we have to use a lot of rigor and a lot of discipline to ensure that those messages are clear, that they're verifiable, and that they've always been conducted by a third party. We're even seeing some work to develop what's called the FTC Green Guides, which is the only sort of place within the US law that you can find guidance on how to make environmental claims to customers. So this is a hot space, Tejas. A lot of work is being done. And I wouldn't be surprised if 5 years from now, you saw not necessarily carbon labels on every product, but you saw, you know, adoption at rates much higher than you see now.
Thank you.
It seems like something, Julia, here, and maybe this will be a question that we can end on. Storytelling is a huge piece of all of this, and certainly the work that you're doing is a lot around storytelling. But I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about the role that you see in storytelling. What stories need to be told, and how you think that's going to play out in making the shift that we're all trying to. Oh, you're on mute.
I'll caveat this all by saying I'm like a huge nerd. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I love data. It's my happy place. But even I, as a passionate data nerd, understand that data doesn't actually change behavior. Stories change behavior, and storytelling is a mechanism for causing humans to change what they do. And so what we do at Planet Fwd is we provide the data to help people understand what's the story that needs to be told, if that makes sense. So for example, I told you the story of Matriarch Foods. So when we provide the data to show you that the tomato sauce being produced by this upcycled food company is 50% lower in emissions than conventional tomato sauce, that's the data. And now the brand can go and tell the story. This amazing founder who created this business, she's working with these great farmers, and use romance and use photography and videography and all these rich storytelling tools to, at the end of the day, get a human being to make a good decision. One of my customers said to me, you know, Julia, the work that we do is actually very simple. We're all making it very complex, but it's very simple. The way that my company gets to net zero is by selling more low emissions products. And you, Julia, you can help me understand how to make low emissions products, how to reduce the emissions intensity of my existing products. But what I need to do is then go and tell the stories to make sure that we sell more of those things. So there has to be this bridge between rigorous and accurate data, and then a partnership that allows the folks who are good at really good at storytelling to do what they need to do to create the right stories.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for your time. This is extremely valuable. I enjoyed it a lot and really appreciate the work that you're doing. And I know that you are probably very busy. So to be able to talk with you in kind of an intimate group like this is Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for making time. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn. Just look for Julia Collins, Planet Fwd, and I'd be super happy to connect with all of you. Thank you so much, and thanks for your note in the chat, George. I appreciate that. Okay,
Thank you
have
so
fun
much.
out
you,
there
Julia.
today.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Drive
everyone.
safe, Ash.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya. See ya.